So today's interview was with the one and only Alex McBrairty, and he is my homie from the US of A. We went off on so many rabbit holes that it is hard to really zone in on what we talked about. But I will say that he is someone who you can relate to when it comes to competing in a physique competition, losing over 80 pounds, feeling quiet, then becoming a very outgoing individual, someone who can sort of read a crowd, someone who has started a business with very little experience with business, but made it happen. He can speak to you on all kinds of different things, and he's a very personable individual. So I hope you enjoy this one. Welcome to the Lifestyle Chase, Season 2. This podcast features high performers who have found a way to live their best life while balancing their health, wellness, friends, and family. I'm your host, Chris Little. Let's get started. The Lifestyle Chase is brought to you by Yeg Fitness. Yeg Fitness is Edmonton, Alberta, Canada's healthy lifestyle community, creating and supporting active living for all. Check them out online at yegfitness.ca and on social media at yegfitness. All right, well, I think I will probably just roll into it. It ended up that this will be episode 77, so are you ready for this?
Oh, I'm pumped.
Okay, well, here goes nothing. Welcome to the Lifestyle Chase. This is episode 77, and I am joined by the ever so handsome Alex McBrairty. So how are you doing?
I am doing awesome, and I'm flattered that you think I'm handsome, even though that's not true.
Well, I mean, we got the handy dandy video here, so I gotta call it as I see it, you know? So, what's the most exciting thing that you did today?
Today, that's a good question. Aside from kicking it with my man Chris, it might have to be one of an old client of mine was on a radio interview today. And he just started his own business doing credit repair. And so I was able to watch him just absolutely crush in the best way possible his radio interview. And so that was really cool to just see someone else just nail it like that.
Yeah, totally. When you first met that person, what was your first impression?
Um, that's a good question. I have this inherent interest in pretty much everyone that I meet. I've never really met anyone who didn't have a super interesting life story to share. And so I think part of the reason why I get along with everyone is because I naturally assume that everyone's got that interesting story and I can't wait to hear it. So I would say in much the same way his name is Mikhail, when I met Mikhail, and I've only ever seen him in person one time. I trained him for a year and a half. It was all online. I saw him in person the first time for a consultation. I haven't seen him in person since. This had to have been 2 years ago now. But in that time, and this is one of the cool things about the internet, is I feel like he's a brother. Like I feel like we're so close just because of the interactions we've had. And so in much the same way, when I first met him, I was curious about him. I wanted to know his story. And I've come to learn that since then. And he's just a great guy. He's transitioned. He was a finance loan officer, and now he's runs a business doing credit repair. So he helps people with poor credit scores repair their credit so they can take control of their life. So in much the same way we connect, because while I'm helping people take control of their lives from the fitness angle of things, he's helping people take control of their lives from the financial angle of things. So we connect on that level of just wanting to help people.
I like it. That's pretty cool. So, I have a question for you, and it is, if we took a time machine back 15 years, where would that put you in your life, and what would that look like?
15 years. I would be just entering high school. No, I'd be in middle school. And I would be the shy, introverted very overweight kid in school who was unsure of himself, as I'm sure most kids are at that time, but even more so, kind of awkward, too shy to really talk to anyone I didn't know. It would look very drastically different than my life now.
Yeah. So, what was the scariest thing that you can remember having to do in middle school?
Ooh, good question. Um, so I guess there's two moments in time. There's the scariest moment that it wasn't scary at the time, but in retrospect, I think if had I known how it turned out, I would have been terrified of it. And then there was the scariest thing that I actually had fear leading up to. And so the second one is, so in our school, and when you're in your last year of junior high school in the 8th grade, you're about 13 years old, and they do this event called Portfolio Day, which is all of the 8th graders, all of the 13-year-olds they spend a couple of weeks in class creating a resume for themselves. And then the school brings in all of these professionals from the community to basically do mock job interviews. And so you can pick what careers or professions interest you, and you make a list of priorities. And then they try to match you with one of these careers that you're interested in, one of these professionals, and they interview you for the job to give you some of that real world experience of going through that. And I remember at the time, my junior high school, they were in the process of being sponsored by NASA. It was some program they were working on. And so all of the kids in my grade got the opportunity, if they wanted to write a letter and try to basically win a place to be interviewed by a real life astronaut. And this was, 15 years ago. So video chat like we're doing now wasn't a big thing. Like, it wasn't everywhere. It was quite a headache to put together. But the astronauts, they did video calls. So they were in Houston at the headquarters, and they did video calls in to interview you for an astronaut career, essentially. And so I was one of the people chosen to do that. I was like one of 3 kids in my entire school who got chosen to do that. And so I remember going into that just being like, I'm about to talk to a TV who on the other end of it, which now it's normal. I kind of laugh about it. But back then it wasn't normal to talk to a TV. On the other end is this person who's been in space, this astronaut, and like, I better not screw this up. So that was probably the scariest thing.
What was the outcome of that conversation?
I was awkward the entire time. It was super. It's weird. I had this feeling, I don't know why, where he asked, like, what about this career interests you? And for some reason, for me, in my head, I convinced myself that he was expecting me to tell him that I thought going to space would be cool. And so I felt like I shouldn't say that because he's heard it all the time. Like, I wanted to be unique in some way. And so I ended up saying something that I wasn't really interested in. I think I was like, I was interested in the way the spaceships were made or whatever. And I regret it now because that changed the course of our conversation. Like, instead of being able to talk to this astronaut about his experience in space, like what it was like, we were talking about how the spaceships are made, which didn't interest me at all. So that's kind of a bummer. But all in all, I mean, it was a unique experience. Not many people can say they have talked to an astronaut or were interviewed by an astronaut, rather.
What are 3 moments when somebody asked you a question and you thought about what you thought they'd want you to say, but you reconsidered it because of that experience? Like, are you picking up what I'm throwing down?
Yeah, so similar to what I had the experience there, where he asked me what I was interested in, and I felt compelled to say something different because of the expectations I thought they had.
So what are 3 scenarios where you've caught yourself and you've been like, no, just like be yourself?
I mean, I'm sure there were plenty of moments like that. I'm sure the job interview I had for my first job in high school was like that, when I tried to convince them that I was excited to bag groceries, which is just not the case ever, right? It could have been. Uh, I don't know if I can recall specific moments because that again, this is a time period where I haven't been that person in a very long time. Now I'm the person where I'm going to express how I feel. And I don't care if you think it's silly or you expected it or whatever. Like I've grown to that place in my life as a person and where I am and who I am that I feel completely comfortable being authentic and being like, this is what I actually want to know from you, or this is what I actually am interested in. So it's a very different way of life now. It's hard for me to remember that time in life.
Well, it's good that we articulate all of these things because honestly, like anybody that you're meeting now is just going to assume that you've always had it grooved out, that you're going to be comfortable with being yourself, that you've never had to like second guess or that you've never had expectations for what you thought other people would want you to say. And for someone like your client, my client, or just any Joe Blow off the street to hear that from getting to know you better is going to help them through times when they're just like beating themselves to the ground.
For sure. And I mean, as you're saying that, I can recall pretty much every client I've ever met for the first time, right? When they come to see me and and I'm asking them what it is they want to achieve from training, right? And I'm sure you've experienced this with clients too. They always give you the quote unquote socially acceptable answer. I want to lose weight. I want to be healthy. I want to do this. I want to do that without really going into the real reason. Like some people are not comfortable just saying, I want to look better, right? Like when I'm walking into a room, I want people to notice me and be attracted to me because they're afraid that that's just not like people will think they're weird for that or they're conceited or superficial or whatever it is, even though that's a completely respectable answer, right?
I completely agree. Like the scenario that's come up for me is a lot of my clients have survived something. Like they're cancer survivors. I have at least 3 cancer survivor clients. And so they come to me because they want to frickin' survive. Like it's and that's tough to say. It's tough to look at somebody and be like, "Hey, I just want to live and I hope you can help me. Like I just want to
Right.
be able to do the things I'm doing still like a year from now, and I hope you can help me." And it's when they're able to just say that, it makes everything else so much easier because they know that you know. They know that you're just as invested in what they are the most passionate about as they are. Like we're both on the same page.
For sure. And it's interesting you mentioned this. So I grew up very overweight. I was the obese kid, and then I lost over 80 pounds at the end of my high school. My senior year in high school. And so, and I alluded to this earlier, the person I am now is very drastically different than the person I was back then in almost every aspect you could imagine. But I find myself, the further I go in my own personal fitness journey, the better shape I get, the more experience I have as the person that I'm growing into, I find myself having to remind people that I wasn't always this person. Because, when you get to a certain point, people, it can write it off as, oh, that's who he is. He's the crazy guy that will get up and go work out early in the morning. He's the crazy guy that does all these things. And he'll have the life that I can't because he's just that person. Right. And I find myself having to remind people that no, like this is not who I always was. This is someone who I have constantly every single day for the past decade have been choosing to become through my actions, through my experiences that I'm choosing to partake in, through the stress that I put myself through and the challenges that I try to overcome. As a reminder that, because I firmly believe, as I'm sure you do too, that people are capable of doing just about anything they want to do if
Yep,
they're willing to commit to it.
I agree.
And just reminding people that like I'm not the example of why you can't be this. I'm the example of why you can, because I was not this person
Yeah.
10 years ago.
So my next question, because I was kind of perusing through your Facebook, I was like, what are the fun facts about him? And it was like checked in at this place, checked in at that place, checked in at this place, checked in at that place. I'm like, holy crap! Like, does he just move around, or does the boy like to travel? So I'm curious. How many places have you lived in your life?
So it's funny you should mention this. I've only ever lived in Ann Arbor, Michigan, where I'm from. I grew up here. I've lived here. I've gone to school here. It's funny because I actually want to move away because I feel like that's like living somewhere else other than your hometown is a growth experience that you can only get if you actually move away and you don't just travel somewhere else. But so I do travel more frequently now than I really ever have, but I've only ever lived in one place.
So what's your favorite thing about Ann Arbor, Michigan?
Ooh. I think because it's a big university town, obviously the University of Michigan is here. It's a melting pot of ideas and people, right? So there's a lot of diversity in people here because people come here from all over the world. And with that, they bring their unique perspectives and ideas about the world and their own backgrounds and cultural differences and all of that. They bring it all here. And so for me, I feel super fortunate that I was able to grow up in that atmosphere and have that be normalized for me. Versus if you go, just 20 minutes in any direction of Ann Arbor, you'll find towns where there's almost no diversity. The ideas centering around their life are kind of very small in the sense that there's not a lot of exchange of ideas. There's not a lot of differing opinions or perspectives or world experience. And so having that be normal to me, I think I feel super fortunate as I then am excited then to travel to other places and continue to explore those differences and the type of people that I get to meet and that I get to know and what they're able to teach me it's spectacular.
That's a great illustration of just like the value of diversity. Just being able to understand things from other people's perspective and being like more open minded to the fact that like there's more than one way to do just about everything, and that can also compute to the fact that like all of those ways could also be a good way to do it, if that made sense.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So right out of high school, I imagine you did some traveling, maybe within the first 3 years or something. Where's the first place you traveled after you graduated high school?
So funny, I actually didn't travel right after high school.
What the heck, man?
Well, so to put it into context, my high school grades were subpar at best. And so part of the reason that I reached a turning point where I began to transform my life, first starting with my weight, was because I begun to realize going into senior year in high school, all of my friends, all of my classmates are applying and getting into colleges. They're planning out the rest of their lives. As I realized, if I didn't make a change right then and there, that the way my life was probably how it was going to be forever. And that terrified me. So I spent the 15 months of my senior year and the summer after committed 100% to losing the excess weight that I had. And I mean, it was working out 3 times. I was literally school, work, and working out. I would go to the gym 2, 3 times a day, depending if I had to work that night or not. I didn't do anything social. Like I was all in and to meet that goal, which it worked very, very well. And then once I got there and I got in and after high school ended, then I was like, okay, I need to get my education in order. Like I need to create a future for myself now that I've proved that I can make serious change. So I started by going to a community college in Ann Arbor. And I mean, I was locked into my academics. I was finishing assignments as early as I could. Like I would have final projects done 3 weeks into the semester. I was like trying as hard as I could to get my grades up and my GPA up so that I could transfer to the University of Michigan, which is where I decided I wanted to go. And once I got there, it was more of the same. It's like, okay, I spent 3 semesters, a year and a half in community college. I wanted to finish my undergrad degree in 4 years in the normal timeline. So I was like, okay, I have 3.5 years to get a full, all my credits in, all of that. So I was just locked in school, which is great because I was able to graduate on time. I graduated in the top 3% of my class. Like, I was able to do big things with my academics. I got unique experiences. I was part of motivation research labs, my degrees in psychology. So I was able to actually do research into motivation with some of the kind of leading researchers in that field. So those experiences were phenomenal. Looking back, there's a little bit more of the social aspect that I didn't get, which I wish I could have done more of. But because of that too, I didn't travel. So my first big international trip was the summer before last, where I went to Spain. So that was my first big trip, was to go to Spain.
That's awesome. So I'm gonna pause us on the travel topic for a second because you kind of got me thinking. When you talk about how you wish you would have had more social experience, what is the thing that stands out to you most that makes you have that desire?
I think it's the friendships that people create when they're in college. I think those are some of the longest lasting, strongest bonds that people will create in their life for a couple of reasons. One, I think it's a time in life when everyone's getting to that point where they're actually discovering the type of people they're going to become. And when you're sharing that experience, such a pivotal moment in your life with these other people, I think that's a bond that gets created that's really, really hard to break. I think it's a time in your life when you've reached the point in adulthood where you have the freedom to do more things, but you also don't yet have the responsibilities that necessarily come with being a full-blown adult. Like carrying a career, making sure if you have a family, make sure you're providing for your family, that sort of stuff. And so I think those two things give you the freedom to really socially have a good time and create very long-lasting memories with those same people. So those are really the big things. It's just kind of missing out on those dynamics.
So now I'm gonna play some Jedi mind tricks with you. Ooh.
Oh,
So
come on.
it's got me thinking about your interview with the astronaut talking to the TV. And it's got me thinking about how you went into that with these sort of expectations of what he wanted you to say. And then you've gone into looking back on what you cannot change, thinking, I want to change that. And that is based on expectations of what you think would have changed. Are you picking up what I'm throwing down?
Yes. So are you challenging me in my belief that I should have had that experience in order to reap those benefits? Is that what you're sort of saying?
Correct. Correct. You kind of we're both confusing each other. So I'm going to re-explain a little bit. So it's basically I am of the belief here's my perspective on your experience that you shared with me so far. And it is basically that you put in the work that it takes to get your university done. Pow, boom, with high marks to empower you to be as prepared, as grounded, as strong, as stable as you could be. But with that, you have to pay to play. You couldn't have done that with the social experience. Now, I will add to that by saying I don't think you would have known yourself nearly as much as you know yourself after doing it that way had you not done it that way. Like, your self-awareness is through the roof in proportion to the self-awareness of somebody that had that time to socialize in the way that you described socializing, with not being so concerned about responsibilities because it's a different time in life, and thinking about that bond. Other thing, and I don't disagree. I also think that a lot of bonds can be formed when you're sharing this experience, when you're sharing the ups and downs, the ebbs and flows. However, I think a lot of people overlook these instances in which we are faced with people where we can build these unbreakable bonds. And I think the cool thing is we've both been exposed to fitness industry events where it's wow, just met this dude for 5 minutes and all of a sudden we clicked. And it's because we went through all the same things the trainers go through. And it's just for me, I like to make sure that people check themselves before they wreck themselves. So don't be spending so much time thinking about the past in which you cannot change that. Like what you did was you completely owned your university experience. Imagine had that not gone the way that it did. Imagine had you not gone all in on that. What would you be today? And like from my perspective, I think your social experience has worked out. Like you've checked some boxes. So I stirred the pot a little bit here, hey?
No, I totally agree with you. I think that, and it's true. I use the experiences I wish I had back then. I use that, or the lack thereof, to ensure that my life now is everything that I want it to be. So I know, like, I will take every opportunity I have to sit down and have that conversation with someone where I'm getting to know them and I'm digging into their life and I'm learning everything about them. Like, the value that I place on these relationships, you're right, is probably greater now because of that experience I had back in university. But I don't think that necessarily means that I can't or shouldn't have those regrets. And should I then take for granted the opportunity to create those relationships now? If that
This
makes
makes
sense.
sense. This makes sense. Honestly, at the end of the day, I think it's important that we kind of like shot the shit on that topic because there's so many instances where a person's more inclined to look at the past, look at the past, look at the past, and they completely lose sight of what's in the
Right.
present. Or they're looking ahead, looking ahead, looking ahead, and they forget where they came from. They forget how hard they've worked to get to be where they are. And like I can relate to you because I there's been plenty of phases in my life where I've been like super quiet, super antisocial, not somebody that's networking with people throughout the week. And I can justify that. I can see how I could have done that a few other ways, but it kind of plays into how I formulate my future, kind of plays into my core values. Like I would say things that are really important to me today, yesterday, and all the days going forward until I change my mind is really prioritizing people first. In which before, in a different time in my life, I might have been like really social and like going to parties or like going out to a bar with friends or something, but I don't know if I would have understood what like people first really meant to me. And it's kind of like the whole soul searching thing is just extremely valuable from my point of view.
For sure. And so you're right. That moment in my life can inform me and help me learn from that experience of how to make that part of my life better now. And it's the realization that back then, like you were talking about earlier, I was focused on the end goal of the process and not stopping to smell the roses.
Yeah.
So making sure that I don't do that now in my life. Make sure I stop, smell the roses, I enjoy the process. I don't be so hyper focused on the end.
The cool thing is what we just did. We basically like splattered this podcast with some big old rabbit hole full of like just thoughts, like all structure out the window. And now I bring us back into it with the travel segment. So I'm curious, tell me more about that trip.
So I chose Spain as my first trip. I actually went there to run with the Bulls, um, which is the big festival that happens once a year, which I'm sure you're familiar with. But you essentially are running through the streets of the city with, 2-ton bulls chasing after you, essentially. And so that was the main reason that I went there. But it was also, as exciting as that was for me, it was one of many highlights of that trip. The biggest one being just the culture shock that I got going into a completely different part of the world where daily life, and the priorities of people are very different than they are kind of over here on the Western side of the world. Um, and so that was a unique experience for me that I thoroughly enjoyed as an opportunity to grow as a person and just living a different way of life for 2 weeks.
I think it's cool that you often your focus is like in seeing things through other people's eyes, in like walking in other people's shoes, and I think that's important for a personal trainer to do. And I think many of the personal trainers that we know and love are good at that. But what is the moment that caught you off guard the most when you were seeing things through the eyes of someone else?
Oh, I'll tell you. So I was actually at a grocery store buying snacks. And so in grocery stores in Spain, they will not give you a bag for your groceries unless you ask for one. And so I was in this grocery store with my girlfriend. We were buying some snacks, and so I understand a little bit of Spanish. I took it in university. I can get by, but I also am not that great at it. So it was a struggle at points to understand what people were saying to me. And so I was in this grocery store line. The line was building up behind us. It was a kind of a busier time of day. And the cashier is scanning our groceries, and then she's asking me a question in Spanish. And I have no idea what she's asking me. I'm standing there for what feels like an eternity, but in reality, it was probably about 60 seconds, 60 to 90 seconds, trying to figure out what it is she's asking me. And during this moment, I realized that the line continues to build behind us, and people are getting visually agitated at the fact that I can't answer this question. And so she was asking me if I wanted a bag for my food. And I had no idea what she was saying. And the people were getting so agitated behind us that I couldn't answer such a simple question. And so for me, I felt dumb. I felt embarrassed. I felt bad for holding up the line. I felt bad that I couldn't answer what I assumed was a simple question, and yet I didn't know what she was saying. And it made me realize and think back again, in Ann Arbor and in a lot of places in the US, and I'm sure throughout Canada as well, where the diversity is higher, there are people who live here who don't speak English that well. And I've seen it time and time again where I've been in a grocery store, I've been in line, having worked in a grocery store, I saw this a lot too, where the same thing happens. The cashier is asking the person in English if they want a bag for their groceries, and they have no idea what they're saying. And just seeing how I know here how people get annoyed, how maybe even at one point in time I've gotten annoyed at the fact that they're holding me up and I can't, go as fast as I'd like to go because they don't understand what's being said. And finally being able to not just like sympathize with them and be like, okay, they don't know the language, like I'm sure it's tough, but to actually switch places and to be on the other end of that and to experience that they don't want to hold anyone up. They want it to go as smoothly as everyone else. They probably feel dumb for not knowing what's being said, because I felt dumb for not knowing what was being said. And so I think that understanding I was able to bring home with me to give myself more patience and more compassion and to really be able to empathize with what people like that in the States feel when they don't know what's being said to them.
It's true. It's true. That's important to talk about because, like, some people, it's really hard to think, wow, like we're kind of starting off from the same foundation. We travel different paths in life. We have different outcomes, but then we're back to the same end point, and we're trying to do relatively the same thing. Like nobody is really inherently evil or anything. So it's kind of like some people get misunderstood. Some people just have a lot of things compound over time. But the more that we can understand where somebody else is coming from, or the more that we can understand why the things that are important to somebody are important to them, or the more that we can understand like how somebody else's day might not quite be just like our day, you know? Like
Right.
when you're walking down the street, you walk down the sidewalk, you see somebody homeless, and you're like, "Oh, stupid homeless person." Well, it's like as much as it's easy to say, they could just get a job. Well, sometimes you have to ask yourself, like, what exactly happened? Because what if I was homeless? What if you were homeless? Like, what would have to happen in our lives, respectively, to put us in a place where we're not only without a home, but we're also having to ask strangers for help? And how would we feel when we're in that position? It's like, how often do people reflect on that? Because I think it's important to advertise that, and especially in fitness, because it's a place where we're all kind of gathering together as a community to better ourselves. And as part of bettering ourselves, the best way to better yourself is to make the people around you better as well.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more.
Nice. I like it. We're on the same page, and honestly, that's why you're here on the podcast.
I'm just gonna say, I'm excited to join the ranks of lifestyle chasers, as I like to call you guys.
I love it.
Um,
Well,
I
it's
feel
like it's such a journey to like talk to so many people. Like sometimes it hits me just how many conversations I've had in the last year, because I'll think nothing of it because like people tend to belittle their own accomplishments, you know? Like we're putting all this work. We know damn well how many hours we put into it. But like when I see on the charts, I'm like, wow, like the lifestyle chase is actually getting back up there. I think, well, like if somebody said that they wanted to listen to a real podcast, I would, oh yeah, let me show you Joe Rogan's podcast. That one's a real podcast, you know? And it's I think a lot of people tend to do that. A lot of people that are role models to me, you can't tell them enough times like how much you admire them because in their own world because they have such great integrity and like they're not out there pumping their own tires. They are just out there trying to do their best in the world, you know? Like the people that we tend to look up to don't have to tell us why we look up to them. It's through their actions that cause us to admire those people. The accomplishments that they make, what every day and how they start it and how they finish it compounds to become. In a lot of cases it can be like our parents. In a lot of cases it can be like a mentor, somebody who did what we do but did it like 10 years before we started, or somebody that reached out and gave us a hand when we needed to level up, which is a great segue because I want to know, in your experience as a trainer, I want to know 3 people that metaphorically reached out their hand to help you in your career so far.
I don't know if I can limit it to just 3.
Pick three at random, or 5. 5 is a good number.
I would have to say, so my kind of start in this career, well, I don't know if it's unique. I don't know if I can say it's unique, but it started in out of college. I didn't know what I wanted to do, and I had some friends and family encourage me to go into personal training because they knew that I loved fitness, and I should try my hand, and I wanted to help people, right? Those 2 things. So they're like, try it, see what happens. You got nothing to lose. So I got certified, and I tried it, and I fell in love with it, right? Probably for the same reasons that we all fall in love with it, because it's awesome to help people and to see them succeed. And I love the way fitness can improve people's lives. And so I started in a commercial gym where I worked for a year. And commercial gyms are kind of, as an employee of a commercial gym, can be somewhat notoriously bad at treating their trainers, right? The pay is awful. In the particular gym I was working at the time, the systems were awful for helping trainers. You were literally thrown to the wolves, but you were getting paid as if you were getting all the support in the world. So you weren't getting paid very much. And so after a year of that, which was good at the time looking back in it because it helped build me into the professional that I am today and helped me discover who I wanted to be as a trainer. After a year, I left to then start my own personal training company. And so I had only been in this industry for a year. I was 23 years old at the time, didn't really know much of anything, especially with running a business. But I told myself if I stayed in that role that I was in, I wasn't going to be able to afford to pay my bills, and I'd probably have to find something else to do. But if I tried it on my own and I failed, I would just have to find something else to do anyways. So I might as well try. And so the point I'm getting at is my first handful of clients, probably about a dozen of them that I met through that gym, had enough faith in me that they followed me as I transitioned into my own coaching practice. They put their faith in me that I'd be able to still give them great training programs while learning how to run this business, while trying to support myself, while having all this stress, extra stress on me that I didn't have before or in different ways. And their faith that I was the man for the job and that I could make all this happen is, without the support of those individuals, I wouldn't have been able to get my business off the ground the way that I did. And on my 6th year doing it on my own. And so just they gave me, those first few clients who followed me gave me the boost that I needed to make all of this work.
Love it. That's awesome. I think you paused.
So
Oh, you didn't pause. You just like paused your face.
So I when I speak to people in person, I'm a very dramatic person. Hopefully, I feel like in a good way, and so I tend to pause for dramatic effect often. And I learned once I started doing online coaching, and I'm doing a video thing like this, that if I do that over a video call, people just think I'm frozen.
That's exactly like I'm just dying over here because I was like, oh my god, he pulled it off so well. I was like, wow, like it's crystal clear, but I'm not hearing anything. He's not moving. Just the damn dramatic effect. Like, what the hell, man?
So I've had to get better about like constantly moving so people don't think I'm frozen. So
well, when you do the dramatic effects, you got to throw up the jazz hands. And I know.
Now I know I got to throw jazz hands. But I got lost in the moment there for a minute. So, but I'm back now.
That's awesome. Can you list off like 2 other people aside from that clutch group of clients that you had that made it happen for you?
Yeah, so probably my mother, who it was an interesting time. Shortly after I started she's been a big supporter, not only of my business, but also in almost being a sort of business coach for me. So when we, she has a degree in marketing. She's worked in PR for her entire career, working with higher ed universities. And so she's very skilled at, when she worked for universities, it was all about, the brand image of the university and making sure the messages that they were putting out were agreeing with the message they were trying to portray as the school that they were. And so shortly after I started my company, she left her last university job to start her own PR consulting practice. So it's been interesting, both of us kind of starting our businesses around the same time and growing and working in them kind of together. But throughout that process, she's been more than generous with her time and being sort of a business coach for me and a sounding board and, helping me to, bounce some ideas around, kind of knowing what it's like being a business owner and the struggles that go with that. She's also been great at teaching me. So there was a couple of times in the past where I did interviews. Like I did a local news segment for my transformation journey from losing the weight and starting a personal training company for Fox 2 News Detroit. And so she was great at giving me some media training to teach me how, when I'm in interviews and when I'm on film and stuff like that, like how to convey the message I want to convey and how to kind of put forth the image that I want to be putting forth with people. And that's helped me tremendously, not only in my career naturally when I do interviews and stuff like that, but more importantly, it's helped me become more aware of how I'm presenting myself when I'm with clients, when I'm in a social environment, and making sure that I'm always aware of the image I'm giving off, the things I say, the energy I'm giving off is congruent with who I am as a person and with what I want people to associate with my business. And I think those are invaluable skills to have.
I think that's really cool that you outline your mom and what she's brought to your career growth. Because, like, if your Facebook feed is anything like mine, it's full of a lot of people who I've never seen before telling me how they can help me grow my business and how burnt out I am. And I'm like, yes, like to some extent maybe you could help me. But like maybe now is not the right time. I don't know. It doesn't it often more often than not 90% of the time rubs me the wrong way because I do not feel that they are as invested in me as I would evidently be in them, you know?
Right.
And quite often, I think that we don't have to look as far as we think that we do when it comes down to personal development. I think there's a lot to be taken from the people who are already in our circle. Like just something as simple as like shooting the shit with your peers, like people who are doing the same things as you. Like the gym that Andrew Coates and I are based out of, Evolve South in Edmonton. Like the concept of that is it's like a work sharing space. Like we're all contractors under the Evolve banner, and there's 3 locations in Edmonton, and so every contractor in there is kind of in the same boat, but doing things in their own way within the parameters of being a personal trainer. And with that being said, there's not going to be 2 trainers that are the exact same way. And if you're open minded, then you can always sit down and talk to another trainer. And it doesn't necessarily matter if they're a newer trainer or if they've been doing it for a long time. Because I'm of the belief that everybody that I meet has something to teach me, and it's just a matter of me being open to it. And in that way, like you're more engaged in what there is to be learned, you know, like rather than so when somebody creates this course that's going to teach you things, they have to almost like zone in on what they think that you want to know, what they think that you're willing to pay to find out. But when you're open to dialogue with people on a continual basis, then sometimes you get to know or you get to learn through conversation, and you're going to learn things that they didn't even know that you wanted to learn. So
Right.
that's what I like about like by us as individuals really strengthening our communication skills, which I know that we're both big fans of doing. Like you've had countless instances where you've guested on different shows, and I think I've seen you shared where you've been on like radio segments. Am I correct?
Yeah, just recently.
Yeah. So like all these different times when communication is such a valuable skill. So my perspective, and I know that there are some extremely talented business coaches that are probably going through my Facebook feed right now. But my perspective is that the more we strengthen the skills that we have, the more we can get from the people that are already in our life. We don't necessarily always need to look for it in a far off land where they say that the grass is greener. And it's not to say that we already have everything we need and we don't need to meet anybody else new. But we might be underutilizing the people in our community. We might be underutilizing the people in our social network. Like there's little skills that can be honed by just being open to making time to talk to somebody for coffee. Like there's been people that have asked me what I do to get my podcast uploaded within like a few hours kind of thing. So I'll just run them through the process, and I'll tell them what programs I use, and I'll tell them what I have to do to keep myself accountable, and I'll tell them what my upload schedule is, and there is no upload schedule because I do it and then I upload it. That's the schedule. But it's just like then they know my process and they can take away what they want from it, or they can leave it where it's at. And vice versa, there's plenty of people that I've learned how they schedule their clients or what software that they use, or what kind of time of day that they like to train in which they feel the most rested, or what their morning routine is. And I can borrow all kinds of stuff from that. And then I didn't, like, it's not to say that everything of value should be free, because there's plenty of things of value that are worth paying for. But it is to say, I think we're leaving a lot of stuff on the table, you know? Like, imagine our personal growth if we just completely utilized everything that is in our life.
For sure. I think there's something to be said for the ability to find solutions in unrelated contexts. And here's what I mean by that. One of the best things that improved my coaching was in a book I read a couple years ago called The Anatomy of Motive. And The Anatomy of Motive is a book about serial killers and how investigators would study and determine what the motives of the crime were in order to figure out the type of person who would commit this crime. But one of the quotes from that book that still sticks with me today is one of my favorite quotes is, once you understand a reason, let me rephrase that. All behavior makes sense when you understand the person's reasons for doing it, right? Every person, the way they behave, how they snack at night, what they eat, why they eat so much junk food, why they want to get healthy, everything that a person does, however normal or weird it may seem, every act of behavior that a person carries out, when you understand what they think that outcome is going to get them and why they've been driven to do that behavior, when you learn what that reason is, it will make sense why they're acting that way. Even if it's going to lead to a faulty outcome, you understand why they're doing it and what they're trying to get from it. And when you understand that, then you can start help people change or see why that might not be the best course of action. And so I've been able to take that book from a book about serial killers and apply it to my clients, whom I hope are not serial killers, and learning, okay, you're eating this way, you want to reach this fitness goal, but your lifestyle is going the opposite direction. There's a reason that that's happening. It could be bad habits. It could be an emotional attachment to how you feel when you're doing these things. It could be something. But if we can figure out what you're gaining from that or what you're trying to gain from that, then I am in the best position to help you figure out a more productive way to do that and thus to get to your healthy goals. So, being able to take such a powerful lesson for me anyways in working with my clients from a book seemingly unrelated and being able to do that in other unrelated contexts, right? Be able to connect the dots where no dots existed previously, I think is a skill that a lot of people overlook when they're trying to develop skills, develop a business, get further in their career. I think is super valuable.
Well, it's a good way to look at things because yeah, I can totally reflect on all kinds of like non-fitness, non-personal development material that totally contributed to some of my greatest strengths as just a human being. From being able to see things from a different point of view and then applying it over to a new area. The next question that I want to ask, because like we're going off on so many rabbit holes, like people are going to be like, what are these guys talking about? Like, wow, I'm just like, I can't even keep track of them. Next topic, super random, but how did you meet your other half, your partner in crime?
Oh, I met her through mutual friends at a club in Ann Arbor.
What song was playing?
I don't know if I know what song was playing at the time. I don't know if I can recall that.
That's okay. How did it all kind of happen? Did you like do your famous dance move, kind of do a jig up there, say, hey, what's up? What did you do?
No, so it was interesting. I was there with a buddy of mine and two other coworkers. We were all trainers in a similar arrangement that you have, where we were all independent contractors working under one gym's roof. And we had just decided to go out. It was the night before Thanksgiving. We decided to go out to this bar. And I didn't realize at the time, but the buddy of mine, who was the one who knew my girlfriend, they went to school together. They went to high school together. So she and a couple of her friends and him had decided they would try to meet up this day because I hadn't seen each other in a long time. And so they would just, catch up and see how everyone was doing. And so we were at this bar. They came, they introduced themselves to us. We introduced ourselves to them. And then it turned out that there were my now girlfriend and two of her friends. One of them left to go see another friend at a different bar. And then her other friend was occupied with a gentleman that she was interested in at the time, who was also at this bar. And so she was kind of left by herself. And so I actually convinced her that she needed new friends and that I would be her best friend. And that's how we spent the evening talking, is I convinced her that I was her new best friend.
That's
It
some
worked.
smooth convincing skills.
It worked. And here we are many years later. So,
So, having shared that story, you're obviously proficient in convincing people that you're their best friend. What made you choose the like what you went to university for? Like it was very much it was psychology. Am I correct?
yes. So I kind of fell into it. I didn't know what I wanted to do. And I didn't know that until even after I graduated, as I mentioned previously. But the psychology classes that I took just as electives were the only classes that really interested me. They were the only ones I was really excited to go to. And so I naturally, or I should say, I had a curiosity about people. And I think part of that stemmed from my childhood and growing up where I was super shy. I mean, I was terrified to talk to people I didn't know. I was always the quiet one. But one of the skills I developed in being the quiet one is I got very good at observing people. And that's a skill that I still use today, being able to observe how people are behaving, how their behavior changes in certain social contexts or when they're in different environments, being able to figure out the social dynamics of new groups that I'm entering. And then being able to adapt my behavior to fit into whatever those group norm behaviors are so that I seemingly am everyone's best friend. And so I think when I realized that, I just had a natural curiosity about why people do the things they do. It was just a natural progression into my psychology degree. And then it was my degrees in psychology specialized in social psychology, which is social dynamics, people interacting with other people. And then later it was further specialized into motivational social psychology, where we studied, what motivates people in certain contexts to do certain things, et cetera, et cetera. So, I've always had a curiosity of people, and I've developed a skill to be very good at observing people. And so I just decided to put it all together and be able to Jedi mind trick whomever I wanted.
That's pretty cool. What are your three favorite things about ice cream? And I know you got answers for that.
My three favorite things about ice cream:
Yeah.
the flavor, the texture, and the temperature.
So, like, it's just I got thinking about ice cream when I was thinking about how I was going to interview you because, like, you've relentlessly promoted protein ice cream. So, what inspired
Oh,
you to do that in the first time?
so I have a protein ice cream recipe that I make almost every single day, and I discovered it by accident. I was actually preparing for my second physique show, and so my calories were very low. I was very hungry, and I needed a way to curb my sweet tooth and not blow my diet out of the water. And so I was, experimenting with different protein shake recipes and stuff like that. And it was just a complete accident. It was a happy accident of a different kind of protein I was using. I was using casein instead of whey just because that's what I had available. I was using some other ingredients that I had randomly found at the grocery store. And instead of coming out like a protein shake, it came out like a Wendy's Frosty or soft serve ice cream that I actually had to spoon in order to eat. Like I couldn't drink it. And from that then was born a purposeful pursuit into adjusting the ingredients to get the consistency just right to actually be like, so the ice cream I make now is like a, I don't know if you guys have Dairy Queen up there, but it's like a Dairy Queen Blizzard. It's like soft serve ice cream. You know, I could put whatever chunks or add-ins I want to it depending on how many calories I have, and it tastes pretty darn good.
Impressive. I like that origin story because so many other people be like, yeah, man, I looked on YouTube and found this influencer and they had this ice cream and they said what they made it out of, and so I got that and I made it out of that. Like, I like your story way better. So.
Well, I appreciate that. It's it was a lot of trial and error with a lot of nasty tasting protein smoothie ice cream conglomerations.
Oh yeah, like you can really mess up protein things super easily. Like, have you ever tried baking things using protein?
Yes. So for a very short period of time, I actually had a side business making protein baked goods, and it was terribly difficult.
What inspired you to make protein baked goods?
I love dessert, and I wanted to find alternatives that still tasted really good that I could enjoy without, ruining my a day's worth of calories and still being able to hit protein goals and all of that fun stuff. So a buddy of mine and I, a fellow trainer, we partnered up and tried our hand at doing that, and we did it for a little less than a year, and then we decided it was not for us.
What was the name of this partnership?
So the business was called Active Indulgence.
Ooh, very nice, very nice. So then, next question. So you did some physique competitions. What are 3 lessons that you learned from that?
So I've done 2, and I will probably never do another one again, and I'll tell you why. The first one I actually decided to do on a whim. I was on vacation, and I was at a pool party, and I was doing a little bit of drinking. And my buddy and I, who we did the show together, we decided that we would do pretty good if we tried doing it. And so that was born the idea to try to do my first physique show. So that's how I got started doing physique shows. But the lesson I learned from that physique show was much, much different than what I anticipated. So for me, I thought it was just going to be this fun thing. I would prove to myself that I was in good enough shape to do it. My only goal for my first show was to look like I belonged on stage, right? I didn't want to embarrass myself. That was my only goal. But what I realized, so the thing you have to remember, growing up as an obese child, and really anyone who spends any amount of time overweight, the most terrifying thing you could possibly imagine is being on stage in front of a group of strangers who are judging you entirely by how your body looks, right? That's essentially what a physique show is. So when I realized going through that process and getting on stage and being, in shorts, no shirt, and having to pose in front of all of these strangers I didn't know, for me, it was kind of a metaphorical laying to rest of the old Alex, the old overweight Alex. For me, it was a moment of liberation where I realized I was finally comfortable with where I had gotten with where my body was at. I was comfortable with the fact that I would never go back to the old overweight Alex, into the bad habits and the way of thinking that I was living with at the time. It was a moment of empowerment for me to realize that this new version of me was here to stay. And so that was a tremendous experience for my first show. And then for my second show, my goal was just do better than I did in my first show, which I did. But I realized during my second show so during the first show, everything was was weird about it. Everything down to the dieting I had to do, the tanning process for getting stage tanned, where they basically just shuttle you in like cattle into the small room where there's camping tents set up, and you have to stand in this camping tent while they spray you down, and you're standing in all these awkward positions, and it's just a very weird experience. And then the process of being backstage during the show and having to eat and pump yourself up and then get on stage and that whole process was very foreign, very weird to me the first time. The second time, I realized that the entire process became normal. Dieting was much easier because I knew how to do it. And I knew I developed the ice cream recipe, so I could just eat that every day and it would fill me up and whatever. The tanning process felt normal to me, even though it's a very abnormal thing, but I was used to it. The process of being on stage, I felt more comfortable. I wasn't nervous. I was just like, I was there to do my thing and whatever. And so I realized that because with physique shows, because I don't have any desire to go to any professional level with it, I don't have a desire to make that like a big thing that I do. I realized in my second show that I had learned everything that I was going to learn about myself from doing these things. I had gone through all the growth moments that I was going to need to develop myself further through this process. I learned about myself, everything I was going to learn through this process. And so after my second show, I realized that I didn't need to do another one.
That's a good way to see it, because I guess I just get concerned when somebody talks about a physique show or a bodybuilding show or like any of that. I get worried that they're doing it for the wrong reasons. I get worried that there's going to be irreversible change in how they see themselves. And so when somebody can share their experience on that, I think that's important.
I mean, there is some of that, right? Like the body fat percentage you get to and the level of leanness you get to was nothing I'd ever experienced before. And it did change the scale at which I see myself being lean, right? There's also struggles that people don't talk about with those shows. So after my first show, I gained 30 pounds in 8 weeks because I was eating everything. And part of that was my hormones were screwed up from how strict my diet was, that I didn't get full, right? I didn't have any sensation of fullness. I either ran out of food or I got sick. And so oftentimes I would make myself sick because I'd eat like a whole jar of peanut butter and then I'd sleep it off and wake up and do it again. And so I put on 30 pounds in 8 weeks. And so that was an experience in and of itself. Obviously I lost it all to do the second show, which I did about a year and a half after the first one. And then I knew what to expect after the second one. So I was able to be much more in control of coming back from that second show so that didn't happen again. But it is, I mean, that's a part of these shows that people don't talk about because it's the ugly part, right? The body image issues you might have afterwards, the metabolism issues, the disordered eating that you'll have because you just are eating anything and everything and you give yourself license to just eat cookies all day. It's something that people don't really understand about at all.
Yeah, but that's why it's so important to put that up on a platform so that people can hear from other people's experience and be that much more informed as they're going after their goals and thinking about what they want or why they want certain things. It's kind of like, what is your why when you go into the gym? Like, do you want to look a certain way, or is it how you feel, how you think you'll feel when you look a certain way? Because more often than not, like, my happiness is not always directly proportionate to how my physique looks. And it's not to say that I've been most happy when I am most out of shape, but sometimes I am most happy when my environment is figured out and when I have a community, when I am engaged with the people in my life. Like, you can have a lot of people in your life. You can have thousands of friends on Facebook, thousands of followers on Instagram. You could see a whole bunch of people in your day, but it's how you see them and how you're connected and how you engage that manifests that feeling of joy, which is a great segue as I continue to ramble on. What in the last 7 days has been the moment where you have been brought closest to joy, the happiest you felt in the last 7 days?
The happiest I felt in the last 7 days. You know, it might have to be. So this past weekend, we were at my girlfriend and I were at a friend's house where they were having a party for the football game, the big University of Michigan football game that was this past Saturday, and just being in a social environment with people whom I enjoy being around and just laughing and having a good time and just, it was one of those moments where like as a fitness professional and particularly as I get further into online coaching, I'm on my phone all the time. I'm on social media for pleasure and for work. I'm texting clients at all hours of the day, every single day of the week. I'm always on my phone. But those moments I get where I realize I don't even think about looking at my phone, those are the moments when I know something special is happening. And so this past Saturday at that party, just laughing in the company of good people, having a good time, no concern, no worry, no inclination to check my phone, just being in the moment and enjoying everyone's company. I think that's probably the closest I've been to just pure joy.
That's a great takeaway. And for yourself, because I know that there's always something that's going to draw you back to the phone. What had you put in place to reduce that feeling? Like you're somewhere, you got clients that are connecting with you from different time zones. What made you feel like, no, this is okay. This is me time?
That's a good question. So I have learned that I don't have to force it for those moments to happen. Like, what's a better way to explain this? So I'm pretty bad at this when I'm at home. I think part of that's because now I work a lot from home. So there's always the reminder that some work could be done. I could be checking, I could be, talking to somebody, whatever. But like, for example, when I travel, like I recently got back from Italy a couple weeks ago. The entire time I was there, I had to remind myself, because I was still checking in on clients, I had to remind myself to check in on clients. Like I didn't have any desire to check my phone. I could go an entire day without touching it. And so that's kind of the measuring stick I use to decide if I'm going too far with my phone. If I still can have those moments where I'm with friends or I'm out to dinner with my girlfriend or we're traveling, and if I can still have those moments where just naturally I have no inclination to touch my phone, then I'm in a good spot. But when that starts to creep in, even during those moments, then I'll probably have to reevaluate.
That's a good way of putting it. Like my way that I can relate to that is there'll be instances where somebody will get a hold of me and they're like, hey, I want to book a session for later this week. Well, the thing is, they've already expressed their intent that they would like to train with me later that week. And it is, as much as I will get to that, it's not going to deter me from giving the person in front of me my full 100% attention for the next 2 hours or for the next day. And then that following day, like, I need to be working with people that are invested enough that it's not going to hold them back if I didn't book them in immediately. When it comes to a new client, maybe I will be a little bit more excited and be like, yeah, let's get this started, because that's just how it works. Like when somebody is making that risky decision that they would like to create change, that's like the scariest moment ever. And if somebody is not responsive to that, then that makes it even more scary, because then they start like second guessing, like, oh, should I be reaching out to somebody? Should I be asking for help? They don't seem to be wanting to help me. Are they too busy or whatever it is? But yeah, absolutely. I like that when you have to remind yourself to get back to the phone, then you know that you are not tied to your phone too much. Right. So my next question for you, because otherwise we're just going to be here all day long, is we have the chemistry for it. I mean, we're good at doing the talking. You know what's coming, and it is, if you could give one piece of advice to someone on how to authentically live their life to the fullest, what piece of advice would you give to them?
So, how do I want to phrase this? So maybe you can help me figure out how to phrase this. So and it ties in with kind of my ultimate mission with people and what I can give to people. is I want for people the ability to develop an undeniable belief in their ability to do anything. And so I think people who want to improve their fitness, who want to hit a certain PR, who want to travel to a certain place, who want to excel in a certain career, who want to start a certain business, who want to begin a certain relationship with a certain person, like whatever the task or goal is in their life, if they can first work to develop that undeniable belief in themselves, which comes through its own process, developing your skills, seeing yourself succeed in other areas, opening yourself up to these new experiences that provide perspective through which you can view the circumstances in your life. But if you can develop that undeniable belief in yourself, you will be unstoppable, and you will be able to overcome any hurdle that you face in pursuit of these other goals that you have for yourself.
That's a good way of putting it. And when it comes down to it, when you're able to pursue these ideas of what feels like a whole life, and when you're able to do that in being yourself, you can't lose. There's no doubt you'll have to face obstacles, but you'll be able to face them.
So. Absolutely. And I think once you have that undeniable belief in yourself, you will be free to be authentically you.
It's true. It's true. So this has been a wonderful chat. I'd like to thank you for joining me. What's the best way for a person to get to know more about you?
They should definitely connect with me on Facebook, which is just facebook.com/Alex_McBrairty. Or they can head over and read the various articles and things I have on my website, ateamfit.com, where I have a number of different ideas going in. Like, there's fitness related articles, but there's also just mindset articles and stuff about life and some reflections of travels that I've had and experiences that I've had and moments of reflection that I think are super helpful. And then also from that website, they can subscribe to my free monthly magazine, The Art of Mastery magazine, which covers all things self-development, fitness, nutrition, mindset, pretty much all these ideas I have about developing an undeniable belief in yourself. I include articles in this monthly magazine that help kind of shift the way you think about the world. And it's completely free. They can subscribe on the website. But those are probably the best ways to get in touch and see what's what.
I love it. That's dope. Thank you for joining me, and I'll cut you loose to roam free in the wild.
I appreciate you, Chris. Thanks again for having me on.
You betcha. We'll talk to you soon.
My man.
If you've made it this far, I am probably about 200 listens away from 10,000 on the lifestyle chase. So, without pressuring too much, if you could listen to one or two, you'd really be helping a brother out. Thank you for all of your support, and I hope you take some time to give the Lifestyle Chase a rating on iTunes, because that makes a huge difference, and I always appreciate it. So, thank you, and catch you next time.